There comes a moment in a person's life when they awaken to a quiet and uncomfortable truth, that they have been living as a servant to their own weaknesses. They rise when they feel like rising. They act when they feel like acting. They stop when it becomes difficult. And in this surrender to comfort, they unknowingly forfeit the greatest weapon they were ever given, the authority over themselves. Look around and you will see it everywhere. Restless minds, undisciplined bodies, spirits that bend with every wind of emotion. They move without direction, and so they remain unnoticed, unchanged, and unremembered. But there is another path, a colder path, a lonelier path, a path where you no longer ask your feelings for permission, where you no longer negotiate with weakness, where you become both the commander and the soldier within. On this path, you begin to understand that discipline is not punishment, it is liberation. It frees you from hesitation. It frees you from fear. It frees you from the chaos that enslaves other men. When you begin to master yourself, something changes. Not in your appearance, but in your presence. Your words become fewer, but heavier. Your actions become slower, but deliberate. You are no longer driven by the need to be seen, and yet you cannot be ignored. Others will sense it, though they cannot name it. They will feel the distance between their excuses and your execution. They will feel the weight of a person who cannot be swayed, who cannot be distracted, who cannot be controlled. Understand this clearly, the world does not fear noise. It fears certainty. It fears the individual who has endured discomfort willingly, who has faced their own mind and brought it into submission, who does what must be done, whether watched or unseen, because such a person cannot be manipulated by reward, nor stopped by difficulty. Such a person becomes a force, and when you reach this state, you will no longer need to announce yourself. Your discipline will speak, your restraint will speak, your presence will speak, and in that silence they will understand. Discipline is the invisible force that separates the ordinary from the untouchable. It cannot be seen by the eyes, yet its presence is revealed in every action, every decision, and every moment of restraint. Most live as prisoners to impulse, obeying every desire as if it were a command from a master they dare not disobey. They eat when temptation calls. They rest when effort becomes uncomfortable. They speak when silence would make them stronger. And so they remain fragile, easily shaken by difficulty, easily broken by resistance. But the one who chooses discipline steps into a different existence entirely. This person does not ask, "What do I feel like doing?" but instead asks, "What must be done?" and then does it without argument. They understand that comfort is not a reward but a test, and that every time they refuse to surrender to weakness, they carve strength into their character. At first, no one notices this battle. There is no applause for waking early when the body begs for more sleep. There is no recognition for remaining silent when anger demands to be released. There is no praise for continuing forward when exhaustion settles into the bones. It is a private war fought behind the walls of the self. Yet with each victory, something begins to change. The mind becomes sharper, less clouded by distraction. The will becomes heavier, harder to move. The person who was once controlled by circumstance begins to stand apart from it. While others panic, they remain still. While others hesitate, they act. While others surrender, they endure. This is why discipline is so powerful. Because it builds a foundation that cannot be seen but cannot be shaken. It removes the randomness from a person's life and replaces it with intention. It turns effort into habit and habit into identity. And over time, without noise or announcement, the disciplined individual becomes someone others cannot easily understand, because they are no longer governed by the same weaknesses that govern everyone else. Most people are ruled by comfort, though they will never confess it in such plain words. They will speak instead of waiting for the right moment, of needing the right motivation, of deserving rest before they have earned it. But look closely at their lives and you will see a pattern that does not lie. They move toward what is easy and retreat from what is difficult. They obey the quiet voice that whispers, "Not now, later, tomorrow," and tomorrow becomes another tomorrow, and their potential remains untouched, like a blade left to rust in its sheath. Comfort becomes their ruler not because it is strong, but because they have never learned to resist it. Comfort speaks in the language of kindness, but its intentions are merciless. It tells you to avoid the strain that would make you stronger. It tells you to remain where you are known, where you are safe, where you are unchanged. It convinces you that struggle is something to be feared, rather than something to be embraced. And so most people spend their lives in quiet surrender, never realizing that every moment of avoidance is a moment of surrendering authority over themselves. They become dependent on ease, and in that dependence, they become weak without noticing it. But the rare individual begins to see comfort for what it truly is. Not an enemy, but a temptation. Not something to be hated, but something to be mastered. They begin to understand that purpose and comfort rarely walk together. Purpose demands sacrifice. It demands that you rise when your body protests. It demands that you continue when your mind invents excuses. It demands that you endure the loneliness of discipline, while others gather in the warmth of distraction. And so this person makes a quiet decision. They stop arranging their life around what feels good, and they begin arranging it around what is necessary. This is the moment their life begins to change, not because the world changes, but because they do. They no longer wait for the desire to act. They act despite the absence of desire. They no longer measure their days by how easy they were, but by how faithfully they followed their purpose. And while others remain servants to comfort, this person becomes a servant to something higher. And in that service, they become free in a way few will ever understand. True power begins when a person conquers their own impulses, though it is a power few ever recognize or value. Most believe strength lies in commanding others, in bending the world to their will, in taking what they desire. Yet these are only reflections of weakness disguised as control. Real power is far quieter, far heavier, and far more enduring. It is born not from domination over others, but from mastery over oneself. It begins in the mind, where every choice presents a battlefield, where every fleeting desire tempts a deviation from the path. To resist these impulses, to pause before acting, to weigh necessity over craving, that is the forge in which true power is hammered. The struggle is subtle, almost invisible. No one applauds the moment you resist anger when insulted, or the moment you refuse indulgence when pleasure calls. No one marks the hours spent training your mind to obey reason rather than whim. Yet these small, quiet victories accumulate, like stones placed one by one until they form a wall no one can scale. Each act of self-restraint builds a foundation of authority over your own being, and with that authority comes a weight that others feel even when you say nothing. They sense that you are no longer moved by the same currents that sway them, that your mind is anchored while theirs drifts with every wind of impulse. When you begin to conquer your impulses, the world begins to respond in ways subtle and unmistakable. Decisions become deliberate rather than reactive. Actions become measured rather than chaotic, and your presence begins to carry a quiet certainty. Others may attempt to provoke you, distract you, or manipulate you, but the impulses that once betrayed your judgment no longer hold sway. This creates a freedom unlike any other, a freedom to act with clarity, to endure without complaint, to command without assertion. It is a power that is recognized instinctively without explanation, because it radiates not in noise or aggression, but in calm, unyielding control. It is here that one discovers that conquering impulses is not a restriction, but an expansion. The mind, once enslaved to every fleeting desire, becomes a domain of your own making. The body, once restless and ungoverned, becomes disciplined and precise. And with each victory over the self, you ascend beyond the ordinary, stepping into a presence that others feel deeply and instinctively respect. True power, therefore, is neither loud nor sudden. It is patient, deliberate, and forged in the quiet, unobserved moments when no one is watching. Silence, restraint, and consistency create an aura others cannot understand. Though its effects are undeniable, most live in constant noise, filling every space with chatter, reaction, and distraction, as if proving their existence requires the attention of others. They speak too much, move too quickly, and seek validation at every turn. Their presence is loud, but it carries no weight. It drifts easily forgotten, easily overlooked, because it is not grounded in anything lasting. Yet there are those who understand a different rhythm, who recognize that true influence does not shout, but moves steadily, like a river carving stone over centuries. Silence is their ally, not a weakness, because it allows observation, reflection, and precision. They do not rush to respond, and in that patience they are always prepared. Their words are measured, their actions deliberate, and in the space between, others sense a force they cannot name. Restraint sharpens this presence further, because it demonstrates mastery over impulses and desire. Where the untrained mind reacts to every insult, every temptation, every whim, the disciplined individual pauses, weighs, and chooses. They do not act for applause or approval, nor do they reveal the depth of their preparation. By restraining the obvious response, they create tension, expectation, and mystery. People are drawn to this restraint without fully realizing why, because it reflects a strength that cannot be challenged by noise or theatrics. It is the quiet assurance of a mind in command of itself, a body in command of its actions, and a spirit that bends to nothing outside its own reasoned principles. Consistency is the final element that binds this aura together. It is not enough to act with restraint in moments of stress or opportunity. One must carry the same discipline into every day, in every encounter, And in every choice, large and small, habits form the invisible scaffolding of character, and the world senses this scaffolding even when it is hidden. A person who is consistent becomes predictable only in their virtue, unwavering in their commitment, and impossible to manipulate or intimidate. Others may try to test them, but the tests fail, not because the person is reactive, but because their pattern is unbroken, their dedication unshakable. Over time, silence, restraint, and consistency combine to produce a presence that is magnetic, formidable, and deeply feared by those who rely on chaos and distraction to control the world around them. It is a presence born not of force but of mastery, and it speaks louder than words ever could. When you no longer seek approval, you become impossible to control. For most, life is a constant negotiation with the eyes and judgments of others. Every action is measured, every word filtered, every choice shaded by the fear of disapproval or rejection. People bend themselves, compromise their values, and silence their instincts in the hope of being accepted, admired, or liked. In doing so, they surrender the most powerful thing they own, their own autonomy. Their lives are dictated not by necessity, not by reason, but by the invisible pressures of external expectation. They chase recognition like a shadow, never realizing that in the pursuit of others' praise, they lose the substance of their own presence. But there is a different path, one that begins with a single radical act, refusing to measure your worth by the applause or scorn of others. When a person no longer needs validation to act, they step into a realm of freedom that few ever encounter. Decisions are made based on what is required, what is just and what is true, rather than what will be applauded or tolerated. Actions are performed with clarity and authority, because the uncertainty of approval no longer distorts the mind. The freedom from external judgment is the key to cultivating an inner fortress, a place where neither flattery nor criticism can breach the walls. It is here that presence begins to carry weight, for the world instinctively senses when a person moves unshaken by opinion, immune to manipulation, and unwavering in purpose. This is why such a person becomes impossible to control. Influence relies on desire for praise, desire for acceptance, desire for belonging. Remove that desire and the mechanisms of manipulation lose their power. No threat, no seduction, no promise can bend the will of someone who acts solely from principle and self-command. They become like a mountain in the distance, immovable, silent, and imposing. Others may speak, protest, or attempt to sway them, but it passes like wind across stone. The more people attempt to influence, the more obvious the futility becomes, and the aura of authority grows in proportion to the refusal to comply. This refusal to seek approval transforms presence into an unspoken force. You no longer need to assert yourself. Your choices, your poise, and your unwavering calm communicate a power that cannot be challenged. In every room, in every conversation, and in every encounter, the person who seeks no approval radiates a certainty that draws attention, commands respect, and when necessary, evokes fear. It is not aggression that creates this effect, but independence, the quiet, resolute mastery of oneself that others feel immediately, whether they understand it or not. Extreme discipline transforms not only your actions but your very presence, shaping the way the world perceives you long before a word is spoken or a gesture made. Most move through life reacting to circumstance, bending with the winds of desire, habit, and distraction. Their lives are composed of fragments, never fully aligned, never fully deliberate. But when discipline becomes absolute, when it governs every decision, every thought, every impulse, it leaves a mark that cannot be ignored. It is not something learned in fleeting moments of effort, but something forged over countless repetitions of right action, of restraint, of enduring what others refuse to endure. And in this forging, the individual begins to change at a deeper level, one that is visible not in trophies or accolades, but in the weight they carry simply by existing in a space. When discipline is extreme, it is unyielding yet quiet. It does not boast. It does not seek validation. It flows through daily routines, invisible yet unmistakable in effect. People notice it in the way you hold yourself, in the precision of your movements, in the calm assurance of your voice. It creates a rhythm that others unconsciously respond to, one that communicates capability, steadiness, and inevitability. There is an energy to such presence, a gravity, because discipline touches not only behavior but character. It signals to the world that this is a person who acts according to principle, who cannot be swayed by impulse or opinion, who has endured the discomforts that others avoid and emerged stronger for it. The aura it creates is not designed. It is a natural consequence of repeated commitment to self-mastery. Moreover, extreme discipline reshapes perception because it makes the extraordinary habitual. Tasks that overwhelm the untrained become routine. Challenges that intimidate the weak-minded are met with calm, deliberate action. People around you sense that there is a difference between knowing and doing, between talking about strength and actually living it. This difference cannot be faked because it is embedded in the very rhythm of your life. Others feel it immediately, in the stillness of your presence, in the economy of your actions, in the quiet authority that requires no announcement. Discipline, in its purest form, becomes your signature, and in a world that fears unpredictability, it draws respect, curiosity, and even fear. It is not only a tool for achievement, but a force that shapes the way reality interacts with you. For those who have mastered themselves command more than their environment. They command attention, influence, and an undeniable presence. The world fears the person who has nothing left to prove and nothing left to lose, because such a person moves untethered by the expectations, opinions, and manipulations that govern the lives of most. People are controlled by need, the need to belong, the need to be liked, the need to be respected. They negotiate every action and word through the lens of what others will think, what others will approve, and what others will reward. But when a person has shed these needs, when they no longer seek approval, admiration, or validation, they enter a space of freedom that few will ever comprehend. Their actions are no longer constrained by fear or desire. They are guided solely by principle, reason, and necessity. In this freedom lies a quiet terror for others, because it exposes the fragility of their own dependence in the limits of their influence. Such a person is dangerous not because they seek conflict, but because they cannot be predicted, controlled, or bargained with. Threats hold no sway, flattery is meaningless, and fear cannot bend them. Their path is dictated not by the shifting winds of public opinion, but by an internal law, unwavering and absolute. Others will sense this immediately. It is visible in their posture, in their gaze, in the deliberate and measured way they speak and act. There is an inevitability to them, a sense that they will do what must be done, no matter the cost, because their actions are no longer contingent on approval or avoidance of disfavor. People instinctively recognize that attempting to sway them is futile, and this recognition breeds unease, tension, and ultimately fear. When a person has nothing left to prove, they no longer compete for status or attention. They no longer react to insult, nor do they crave recognition. Their presence itself becomes a statement, a force that demands acknowledgement without announcement. Others feel it in subtle ways, in conversations that end with silence, in rooms where their gaze alone shifts the energy, in moments when action is required and they are already moving while others hesitate. They are not loud, yet their authority cannot be ignored. The absence of desire to please or impress amplifies their power because it signals mastery over the self, mastery over circumstance, and mastery over the expectations that bind others. In this state, the fear they evoke is not manufactured, but a natural consequence of their untouchable independence, their unshakable purpose, and the undeniable certainty that they answer only to themselves.